20 celebrities who are battling life-threatening diseases. What if the heroes who save the world on screen are silently losing the battle for their own lives behind closed doors? We see them radiating power on the red carpet, but beneath the designer suits lies a harrowing reality of aggressive cancers, incurable brain diseases, and agonizing chronic pain. From the legendary Iron Man of action films to the angelic voices that define generations, these icons are facing their final, most terrifying curtain call. Today, we peel back the glamorous facade to reveal the raw, heartbreaking truth of 20 superstars fighting for every single breath. Their struggle is a haunting reminder that fame is no shield against mortality. Subscribe to American Icon Stories now, hit the bell, and join us as we honor the warriors of Hollywood. Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas has spent decades projecting the ultimate image of untouchable Hollywood power, effortlessly commanding the silver screen with his fierce, Academy Award-winning intensity. For generations, he was the absolute embodiment of the highly successful, fiercely driven leading man. However, behind his famously confident, untouchable exterior, he was suddenly forced into a grueling, life-or-death battle that completely stripped away his cinematic invincibility. When the acclaimed actor publicly revealed his horrifying diagnosis of advanced stage 4 throat cancer, the global entertainment industry was left in a state of absolute, paralyzing shock. This terrifying ordeal wasn't merely a private medical crisis carefully hidden behind the heavily guarded gates of a luxury estate. It became an incredibly difficult, highly scrutinized public journey of survival. Enduring brutal, physically devastating rounds of intense radiation and grueling chemotherapy, Douglas had to confront his deepest, darkest fears, an absolute human vulnerability, under the blinding glare of the ruthless media spotlight. His once booming, commanding voice and robust physical frame were visibly diminished by the merciless disease and the deeply toxic yet necessary medical treatments. The terrifying reality of potentially losing his iconic voice or even his life loomed heavily over his entire family. The heavy toll extended far beyond just his physical suffering, casting a dark, terrifying shadow over his loved ones, who helplessly watched him bravely fight for every single breath. Yet, with unyielding determination and a ferocious will to survive, he fought his way back from the terrifying brink of death, miraculously achieving full remission. While he ultimately emerged victorious, returning to the screen with a profound new appreciation for his fragile existence, the agonizing physical after effects and lingering psychological hauntings of the battle permanently changed him. He openly confessed how the brush with mortality completely rewired his entire perspective on fame, family, and the fleeting nature of time. Today, Michael Douglas stands as a profoundly inspiring, heartbreaking symbol of human resilience. His harrowing journey violently shattered the illusion of celebrity immortality, proving that no amount of massive wealth or global adoration can ever buy immunity from the sudden, devastating strike of a cruel, life-threatening illness. Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis completely redefined the very essence of the global cinematic action hero, thrilling millions of dedicated fans worldwide with his explosive stunts, rugged masculinity, and unbreakable charm. For over 3 decades, he reigned supreme in the legendary Die Hard franchise, projecting the ultimate image of an entirely invincible, wisecracking survivor who could miraculously walk away from any catastrophic explosion or terrifying gunfight. On the silver screen, he was absolutely indestructible, a larger-than-life titan who always saved the day against impossible odds. But the deeply tragic, profoundly heartbreaking reality he currently faces behind closed doors is a cruel, invisible, and utterly relentless enemy that no amount of sheer physical strength or Hollywood magic can ever defeat. The entire world was left in a state of absolute collective devastation when his family bravely announced his terrifying initial diagnosis of aphasia, a deeply devastating neurological condition that severely attacks a person's cognitive foundation and essential communication abilities. The horrific nightmare only deepened a year later when the illness aggressively progressed into frontotemporal dementia, commonly known as FTD. This merciless, entirely incurable disease is systematically and violently robbing the beloved, iconic actor of his precious lifetime of memories, his famously brilliant personality, and his fundamental ability to meaningfully interact with the devoted loved ones surrounding him. It is a slow, agonizing erasure of the charismatic man the world once knew and adored. This tragic, completely irreversible medical diagnosis forced an abrupt, deeply emotional, and highly publicized retirement, violently ending an illustrious multi-billion-dollar career that fundamentally shaped modern cinema. Watching an indestructible global icon, a man who consistently saved the world on screen, slowly fade into the quiet, isolating shadows of a devastating mental decline, is a devastating, unforgettable testament to the terrifying ruthlessness of neurological diseases. His intensely private battle, however, has sparked a massive global conversation about the brutal, unforgiving reality of dementia. It transforms his final public chapter from one of high-octane, blockbuster action into a deeply moving, profoundly tragic narrative of unyielding family sacrifice, boundless love, and the absolute, terrifying fragility of the human mind. Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez spent her entire formative childhood and turbulent teenage years growing up directly under the intensely magnifying, completely unforgiving spotlight of global celebrity, transitioning from a beloved, bubbly television darling into a massively successful, chart-topping pop sensation and highly acclaimed actress. She seemed to possess a perfectly flawless, incredibly privileged life. However, lurking viciously beneath the dazzling red carpets and her infectious, radiant smile was a terrifying, life-threatening medical secret that was slowly destroying her from the inside out. In the absolute prime of her skyrocketing career, Gomez bravely revealed her horrifying, excruciatingly painful battle with lupus, a devastating, highly unpredictable autoimmune disease where the body's own immune system aggressively attacks its healthy tissues and vital organs. This wasn't merely a minor health inconvenience. It was an agonizing, relentless war that caused severe, crippling joint pain, overwhelming chronic fatigue, and terrifying, potentially fatal systemic inflammation. The absolute climax of this horrific medical nightmare occurred when the vicious disease completely ravaged her kidneys, pushing her dangerously close to the absolute brink of death. To miraculously survive, the young superstar was forced to undergo a massive, incredibly risky, and highly publicized emergency kidney transplant, graciously receiving the life-saving organ from a devoted friend. While the major surgery ultimately saved her fragile life, her agonizing journey was absolutely far from over. The immense, crushing physical trauma of her life-threatening illness triggered a massive, deeply terrifying secondary battle with severe, paralyzing anxiety, profound depression, and complex mental health challenges. The immense dual burden of fighting a terrifying physical disease while simultaneously battling severe psychological demons under the ruthless scrutiny of the paparazzi nearly broke her entirely. Yet, instead of retreating into the comforting shadows of her immense wealth, she fiercely utilized her staggering global platform to completely shatter the toxic stigma surrounding chronic invisible illnesses, Selena Gomez stands today as an incredibly powerful, deeply inspiring symbol of raw, unfiltered survival. She powerfully proves that even the brightest, most glamorous young stars carry incredibly heavy, deeply painful burdens, courageously battling invisible monsters far away from the blinding camera flashes. Shannen Doherty. Shannen Doherty was a defining fierce icon of 1990s television, famously captivating global audiences with her fiery, unapologetic presence on massive hit shows like Beverly Hills, 9, 0210, and Charmed. She was the ultimate Hollywood rebel, a fiercely independent actress who never backed down from a confrontation and always lived life entirely on her own terms. However, the most terrifying, agonizing battle of her entire life was not fought against ruthless tabloid rumors or demanding studio executives, but against a completely invisible, merciless biological killer. When she was initially diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, the world watched in awe as she bravely confronted the terrifying ordeal with her signature, unyielding defiance. She documented her grueling chemotherapy sessions, the heartbreaking loss of her famous dark hair, and the immense, crushing physical exhaustion with profound, unfiltered honesty. Tragically, after a brief, hopeful period of remission, the devastating monster violently returned, mutating into incurable stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. The disease aggressively invaded her bones and eventually spread to her brain, forcing her into a highly agonizing daily confrontation with her own mortality. Yet, facing an absolute, terrifying death sentence, Doherty completely refused to surrender to the darkness. She weaponized her immense suffering, utilizing her massive global platform to aggressively advocate for advanced cancer research and fiercely dismantle the toxic stigma surrounding terminal illness. She openly discussed the paralyzing fear of leaving her loved ones behind and the profound, deeply emotional process of preparing for the inevitable end. Despite enduring unimaginable, relentless physical pain and the heavy, suffocating psychological burden of a terminal diagnosis, she continued to work, launch a deeply personal podcast, and live every single remaining moment with breathtaking, ferocious intensity. Her heartbreaking, devastating passing in 2024 permanently extinguished a brilliant Hollywood flame, leaving an immeasurable void in the entertainment industry. Shannen Doherty's incredibly tragic, magnificently inspiring legacy is not defined by the cruel disease that ultimately stole her life, but by the extraordinary, unbreakable warrior spirit she demonstrated until her very last defiant breath. She remains an eternal emblem of raw courage, proving that true strength shines brightest in the face of absolute despair. Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox captured the absolute heart of the entire globe as the incredibly charismatic, wildly energetic Marty McFly in the legendary Back to the Future franchise. With his radiant, boyish smile, lightning-fast comedic timing, and seemingly boundless physical vitality, he was the absolute, undeniable golden boy of 1980s Hollywood. He possessed a deeply infectious optimism that made him one of the most universally beloved, highly bankable cinematic stars on the entire planet. However, at the absolute soaring pinnacle of his skyrocketing career, a horrifying, completely unimaginable medical tragedy violently struck. At the incredibly young age of just 29 years old, a devastating thunderclap completely altered the trajectory of his entire existence. Fox was secretly diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease, a deeply cruel, progressive, and entirely incurable neurological disorder designed to systematically destroy the human body's motor system. For 7 agonizing years, he desperately hid his terrifying, life-altering diagnosis from the fiercely judgmental public, masking his increasingly uncontrollable physical tremors behind carefully choreographed movements and exhausting, deeply draining performances. The immense, suffocating psychological burden of carrying such a heavy, devastating secret while trying to maintain his pristine A-list Hollywood image nearly drove him to the absolute breaking point. But when he finally, bravely shattered the heavy silence in 1998, he completely transformed his darkest personal tragedy into an incredibly powerful, deeply inspiring global crusade. Refusing to allow this merciless illness to completely dictate his destiny, he launched the Michael J. Fox Foundation, an absolute powerhouse organization that has aggressively raised billions of dollars for groundbreaking, life-saving Parkinson's research. Today, the stark, heartbreaking reality of his daily existence is a relentless, exhausting physical struggle. The vicious disease has slowly, mercilessly robbed him of his famous agility, violently replacing his effortless physical grace with rigid stiffness, severe tremors, and painful mobility limitations. Watching an icon of explosive, youthful energy become a prisoner within his own failing body is a profoundly devastating, deeply moving tragedy. Yet, despite the horrifying constant physical deterioration, his brilliant, fiercely sharp mind and incredibly radiant optimism remain entirely untouched. Michael J. Fox is not just a beloved movie star. He is an absolute, unstoppable warrior. His decades-long agonizing battle serves as a magnificent, tear-jerking testament to the incredible, unbreakable power of the human spirit. Emilia Clarke. Emilia Clarke completely conquered the global television landscape as the fiercely powerful, unyielding mother of dragons on the monumental fantasy epic Game of Thrones. For 8 record-breaking seasons, she portrayed an absolute indestructible conqueror who confidently walked through roaring fires and commanded massive armies. Yet, entirely hidden behind her commanding regal, on-screen persona and her famously radiant, infectious smile, the young British actress was silently fighting a deeply terrifying, catastrophic battle for her own physical survival. At the absolute soaring peak of her skyrocketing international fame, just after wrapping the exhausting first season of the blockbuster series, a horrifying medical nightmare violently struck without a single warning. She suffered a massive, life-threatening subarachnoid hemorrhage, a catastrophic brain aneurysm that suddenly plunged her into an agonizing, blinding realm of unimaginable physical pain and absolute, paralyzing terror. Rushed into highly invasive emergency brain surgery, Clarke miraculously survived the initial brush with sudden death, but the grueling, deeply traumatic ordeal was absolutely far from over. The immense psychological weight of recovering from severe neurological trauma while trying to flawlessly maintain her incredibly demanding, highly scrutinized A-list acting schedule was utterly suffocating. The horror multiplied exponentially when a second, highly precarious aneurysm was discovered, eventually requiring another, even more aggressive and deeply invasive surgical intervention that required cutting through her skull. Facing the agonizing, terrifying possibility of permanent cognitive damage, losing her ability to speak, or suddenly dying at any given moment, she carried an incredibly heavy, profoundly dark secret beneath the dazzling, glamorous gowns of the Hollywood red carpets. Today, having bravely crossed the terrifying, razor-thin threshold between life and death twice, Clarke has completely transformed her deeply traumatic, near-fatal medical experiences into a magnificent, highly inspiring crusade. She fiercely launched a charity dedicated to aggressively supporting neurorehabilitation, openly and courageously sharing the harrowing, deeply vulnerable details of her invisible psychological scars. Her incredibly dramatic, heartbreakingly raw journey brilliantly highlights the absolute, terrifying fragility of the human brain. Emilia Clarke is no longer just a beloved, iconic television queen. She is an absolute, unstoppable warrior in real life, powerfully proving that true, enduring strength is born not from mythical dragons, but from surviving the darkest, most terrifying shadows of human mortality. Celine Dion. Celine Dion is universally revered as an absolute, untouchable vocal goddess, a deeply majestic music icon whose breathtaking, angelic voice has seamlessly conquered the hearts of hundreds of millions worldwide. For decades, she fiercely reigned supreme as the ultimate queen of the grand stage, delivering incredibly powerful, emotionally shattering performances that flawlessly defined an entire generation of popular music. Her legendary vocal cords were an incredibly rare, seemingly indestructible gift that completely transformed her into an international phenomenon. However, behind the dazzling, rhinestone-studded concert residencies and the towering, sold-out arenas, a deeply horrifying, entirely unimaginable medical tragedy began to violently dismantle her meticulously crafted world. In a devastating, highly emotional public announcement, Dion revealed her terrifying, agonizing diagnosis of stiff person syndrome, an incredibly rare, viciously progressive, and entirely incurable neurological disorder. This merciless, deeply cruel disease is systematically and violently attacking her central nervous system, triggering severe, agonizing muscle spasms that can painfully lock her entire physical body into an incredibly rigid, terrifyingly paralyzed state. The absolute, most heartbreaking tragedy of this horrifying medical nightmare is that the relentless condition is aggressively robbing her of the very instrument that fundamentally defined her majestic existence, her spectacular, world-renowned singing voice. For a profoundly dedicated artist whose entire soul and life's purpose were intricately woven into the magnificent art of live performance, the sudden, devastating inability to effortlessly hit those iconic, soaring high notes is an unimaginably dark, profoundly crushing psychological torment. The vicious disease has tragically forced her into an incredibly difficult, deeply isolating hiatus, completely tearing her away from the fiercely devoted global audiences she loves so deeply. Watching an incredibly dynamic, explosive stage performer become a painful prisoner trapped inside her own failing, rigid muscles is a deeply haunting, universally devastating reality. Yet, despite enduring unimaginable, relentless physical agony and the heavy, suffocating grief of losing her greatest artistic gift, Dion completely refuses to be silenced by the despair. She has bravely peeled back the heavy velvet curtain, courageously documenting her excruciating daily medical battles in highly vulnerable, tear-jerking documentaries to aggressively raise global awareness for this obscure disease. Celine Dion's profoundly tragic, incredibly moving journey serves as a heartbreakingly beautiful testament to raw, unyielding human endurance. She powerfully demonstrates that while a devastating illness can cruelly steal the physical mechanics of a legendary voice, it can absolutely never extinguish the fiery, unbreakable spirit of a true immortal superstar. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen was once the undisputed highest-paid king of American television, a wildly charismatic powerhouse whose lightning-fast comedic wit fueled the massive global success of 2.5 Men. Coming from a legendary acting dynasty, he possessed a natural, effortless magnetism that made him a household name for decades. However, behind the scenes, His life was a chaotic, high-speed collision of unimaginable excess, public meltdowns, and a notoriously reckless lifestyle that eventually pushed him toward a terrifying medical abyss. The entire world was left in a state of absolute paralyzing shock when Sheen appeared on national television in 2015 to reveal a deeply guarded, life-altering secret. He was HIV positive. This wasn't just a sensational tabloid scandal. It was a visceral, highly publicized confrontation with a century-old illness that had long been shrouded in intense fear and crushing social stigma. The horrifying reality of his diagnosis had actually been haunting him in total secrecy for 4 agonizing years, a period during which he faced the devastating psychological weight of his own mortality, while battling ruthless extortion attempts and personal collapse. The immense, suffocating pressure of carrying such a heavy, life-threatening secret nearly destroyed his already turbulent career. However, by courageously shattering the silence, Sheen underwent a remarkable, highly unexpected transformation. He leveraged his massive, highly controversial global platform to become a vocal advocate for HIV awareness, aggressively participating in advanced clinical trials and promoting the vital importance of modern medical treatments that have turned a once fatal diagnosis into a manageable chronic condition. Today, while his body bears the invisible scars of a decade-long battle with both the virus and his past addictions, he remains a defiant symbol of survival in the modern age. His journey is a deeply complex, incredibly raw narrative of public fallibility and medical redemption. He serves as a blunt, unforgettable reminder that no level of astronomical fame or elite status can shield a person from the consequences of their choices or the sudden, merciless strike of a deadly virus. Charlie Sheen's harrowing, highly publicized battle fundamentally changed the global conversation surrounding HIV, proving that even the most troubled icons can find a path toward resilience, transforming a dark personal tragedy into a powerful, life-saving message for millions. Christina Applegate. Christina Applegate has been a beloved, fiercely talented fixture of the American entertainment industry since her childhood, famously capturing hearts as the rebellious Kelly Bundy before evolving into a sophisticated Emmy-winning powerhouse. With her radiant beauty, sharp comedic timing, and an incredibly resilient spirit, she seemed to have navigated the treacherous waters of Hollywood fame with remarkable grace. However, her life has been a relentless, heartbreaking series of brutal physical battles that would have shattered a lesser person. After courageously surviving a terrifying, highly publicized bout with breast cancer that required a double mastectomy, the world believed she had finally paid her dues to fate. But in a cruel, unimaginable twist of destiny, Applegate was struck by a second, even more devastating medical tragedy: a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, MS. This merciless, autoimmune disease aggressively attacks the central nervous system, and for Applegate, the onset was exceptionally severe, rapidly robbing her of her famous physical agility and effortless mobility. The terrifying reality of this incurable condition turned the simple act of walking or standing into a grueling, excruciatingly painful ordeal. In a heartbreakingly raw display of honesty, she has used her global platform to pull back the curtain on the ugly, unglamorous truth of living with MS. From the crushing, systemic fatigue to the agonizing reliance on walking canes and wheelchairs, she famously remarked that she noticed the symptoms while filming the final season of her hit show Dead to Me, struggling to complete her scenes while her body literally began to fail her. Despite the immense physical deterioration and the heavy, suffocating psychological grief of losing her independence, Applegate's fierce, darkly humorous spirit remains entirely unbroken. She has become an absolute, unstoppable warrior for MS awareness, refusing to hide her struggles or pretend that things are okay when they aren't. Watching a dynamic, explosive performer who once commanded the stage with such grace become a prisoner of her own malfunctioning nerves is a profoundly moving, deeply haunting tragedy. Christina Applegate's journey is not just a story of medical hardship. It is a magnificent, tear-jerking testament to the incredible, unbreakable power of human endurance. She continues to fight every single day, proving that true strength isn't about physical perfection, but about the ferocious courage to keep standing, even when your own body is screaming for you to stop. Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda is an absolute towering legend of global cinema, a fiercely intelligent, twice Academy Award-winning powerhouse who has spent over 6 decades reinventing herself as an actress, fitness tycoon, and world-renowned activist. With her timeless, statuesque beauty and an unrelenting fire in her soul, she has always projected the image of a woman who is completely, utterly indomitable. However, behind her impeccably sophisticated public persona and her legendary commitment to physical health, Fonda has been locked in a decades-long, grueling struggle against a silent, persistent, and terrifyingly lethal predator, cancer. In a characteristically brave and transparent display of honesty, the iconic star has revealed that she has been forced to battle multiple forms of the disease, including skin cancer and breast cancer, undergoing numerous surgeries to remove malignant growths that threaten to extinguish her brilliant light. The absolute climax of this horrifying medical saga occurred recently when she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a serious, life-threatening cancer of the lymphatic system. At an age where most would understandably retreat into the shadows of quiet recovery, Fonda weaponized her diagnosis, utilizing her massive global platform to document her grueling chemotherapy sessions with breathtaking, unfiltered courage. She faced the terrifying reality of her own mortality with the same fierce, unyielding defiance that defined her political activism in the 70s, refusing to allow the merciless disease to dampen her spirit or silence her powerful voice. The immense physical toll of the treatments, combined with the heavy, suffocating psychological burden of a recurring illness, nearly pushed her to the breaking point. Yet, she emerged from the darkness once again, joyfully announcing that her cancer was in remission just in time for her 85th birthday. Today, Jane Fonda stands as a magnificent, deeply moving symbol of raw, unyielding human endurance. While her body carries the invisible scars of countless medical battles, her fierce intellect and boundless energy remain entirely untouched by the ravages of time or illness. Her harrowing journey has fundamentally shattered the toxic, youth-obsessed illusions of Hollywood, proving that true, enduring strength is forged through a relentless willingness to confront the most terrifying shadows of the human experience. Jane Fonda's incredibly tragic, magnificently inspiring legacy is a powerful, tear-jerking testament to the fact that even the most legendary icons are fundamentally fragile. She continues to fight every single day, powerfully demonstrating that a woman's worth and her will to live are never defined by a diagnosis, but by the unbreakable fire that burns deep within her soul. Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates is a master of her craft, an Academy Award-winning titan of the silver screen, whose extraordinary, chameleon-like versatility has chilled and captivated audiences for generations. From her terrifyingly iconic, career-defining performance in Misery to her fiercely sharp, emotionally complex roles in modern television, She has always been an absolute force of nature. But while she was busy portraying some of the most formidable characters in cinematic history, Bates was secretly enduring a series of horrific, life-threatening health catastrophes that would have completely broken a lesser person. Her first brutal collision with fate occurred in 2003 when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, a silent, deadly killer that forced her into an agonizing private war for survival. She fought that battle in total secrecy, terrified that the industry's ruthless stigma against illness would permanently end her illustrious career. The horror only intensified nearly a decade later, when she was struck by a second, equally devastating blow, a diagnosis of breast cancer. This time, the battle required a massive, physically and emotionally shattering double mastectomy. But the most enduring, agonizing tragedy of her medical journey began after the surgeries, when she developed lymphedema, a chronic, incurable condition that causes severe, relentless swelling and excruciating physical pain in her arms. For years, this invisible, heavy burden left her feeling profoundly isolated and deeply depressed, struggling to move or even work while her body felt like a painful, unrecognizable prison. The crushing weight of these recurring medical traumas, combined with the physical disfigurement of her surgeries, nearly drove the legendary actress into a permanent, heartbreaking retirement. However, instead of succumbing to the darkness, Kathy Bates underwent a magnificent, highly inspiring transformation into a fierce vocal advocate for those suffering from lymphatic diseases. She stripped away the heavy, glamorous mask of Hollywood fame to bravely show the world the raw, unglamorous reality of her daily physical struggle. Watching a dynamic, explosive performer who has won every major award in show business become a tireless warrior for medical awareness is a profoundly moving, deeply haunting tragedy. Kathy Bates's journey is not just a story of surviving multiple cancers. It is a magnificent, tear-jerking testament to the incredible, unbreakable power of the human spirit. She continues to command the screen today with more fire than ever, proving that true Hollywood royalty is defined by the scars we carry and the ferocious courage it takes to keep standing in spite of them. Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman was far more than a blockbuster movie star. He was a majestic cultural phenomenon who breathed life into the legendary King T'Challa, becoming an eternal symbol of strength, honor, and African excellence for millions of children worldwide. As the lead of Black Panther, he carried the immense weight of a global movement on his shoulders, projecting an image of peak physical power and royal invincibility. However, the world was left in a state of absolute, agonizing shock when it was revealed that throughout his entire tenure as a superhero, Boseman was fighting a terrifying secret war for his own life. In 2016, at the very moment his career was skyrocketing to the stars, he was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, a devastating, life-threatening diagnosis that he chose to hide from the public, the media, and even his own colleagues. For 4 grueling years, Boseman lived a double life that was as heroic as any cinematic narrative. While the cameras rolled, he performed high-octane stunts and delivered commanding performances. But between takes and during grueling press tours, he was undergoing countless surgeries and agonizing rounds of chemotherapy. The sheer, superhuman discipline required to maintain his statuesque, kingly physique while his body was being systematically ravaged by cancer is a testament to an unbreakable spirit. He visited children in cancer wards, bringing them hope and joy, while he himself was silently battling the exact same monster. He refused to let his illness define him or slow his mission to leave a meaningful, lasting legacy through his art. When the news of his passing broke in 2020, the global outpouring of grief was unprecedented. The The tragic realization that he had filmed his most iconic roles while suffering an unimaginable pain turned his filmography into a heartbreaking archive of sacrifice. Chadwick Boseman didn't just play a king. He lived like one, prioritizing his purpose over his pain until his very last breath. His devastating loss at the tragically young age of 43 remains one of Hollywood's most profoundly moving tragedies. He proved that true immortality isn't found in a costume, but in the ferocious courage to inspire a generation while walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson was the absolute radiant personification of athletic perfection, a basketball virtuoso whose dazzling Showtime style and infectious million-dollar smile transformed the NBA into a global spectacle. With his towering 6'9" frame and unmatched physical grace, he seemed like a modern-day god, untouchable and eternally vibrant. However, the entire world stood still in absolute paralyzing terror on November 7, 1991, when the legendary athlete stepped behind a microphone to deliver a message that felt like a global death sentence. At a time when HIV was a terrifying, misunderstood plague synonymous with immediate death, Johnson bravely announced that he had contracted the virus and was retiring from the sport he loved. It was a staggering, heart-wrenching moment that shattered the illusion of the invincible athlete and plunged his millions of fans into a state of profound mourning. In the early 90s, the social stigma surrounding HIV was a heavy, suffocating darkness, yet Johnson refused to retreat into the shadows of shame or despair. Instead, he weaponized his monumental fame to launch a fierce, decades-long crusade against the epidemic. He faced the terrifying reality of his diagnosis with the same competitive fire he showed on the court, becoming the first major heterosexual global icon to put a recognizable, beloved face on a disease that the world desperately wanted to ignore. His battle was not just medical, it was a cultural revolution. He educated the public, aggressively raised hundreds of millions of dollars for life-saving research, and became a living, breathing testament to the power of modern medicine and early detection. Today, more than 30 years after that fateful announcement, Magic Johnson stands as a magnificent, miraculous symbol of survival. The fact that he is not only alive, but thriving as a billionaire entrepreneur and global ambassador is a breathtaking triumph over a virus that has claimed millions of lives. Watching him remain so vibrantly healthy and energetic is a profoundly moving, tear-jerking victory for science and human resilience. His journey fundamentally changed the trajectory of the HIV crisis, replacing a narrative of certain death with a powerful message of hope and long-term management. Magic Johnson's legacy is defined by the moment he chose to stop being just a basketball player and started being a warrior for humanity, proving that even a global death sentence can be defeated by a spirit that refuses to quit. Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze was the ultimate Hollywood triple threat: a classically trained dancer, a rugged action hero, and a soulful leading man who possessed a uniquely magnetic, electrifying physical grace. From his legendary hip-swiveling charisma in Dirty Dancing to his hauntingly romantic intensity in Ghost, he personified a vibrant, indestructible masculinity that made him a global heartthrob for decades. With his muscular frame and effortless athleticism, he seemed like the very embodiment of life and vitality. However, the world was left in a state of absolute gut-wrenching shock when the invincible star was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and merciless killers in the medical world. This wasn't just a health battle. It was a sudden, violent confrontation with a disease that offered almost no hope for survival. Facing an incredibly grim prognosis, Swayze chose to fight back with a ferocious, awe-inspiring intensity that mirrored the toughness of his most famous characters. He refused to hide in the shadows of his illness, instead choosing to film a grueling television series while undergoing taxing rounds of chemotherapy, often refusing pain medication to ensure his performance remained authentic. The sight of the once strapping icon becoming visibly frail and gaunt was a profoundly devastating, heartbreaking image that moved millions to tears. Yet, throughout the 20 months of his public struggle, he never once surrendered his dignity or his passion for his craft. He famously declared that he was a miracle for simply surviving as long as he did, weaponizing his final days to bring unprecedented global attention to the desperate need for pancreatic cancer research. His tragic passing in 2009 at the age of 57 marked the end of a legendary era, leaving the entertainment world in a state of profound mourning. The realization that even a man of his incredible physical prowess could be so rapidly dismantled by a cruel illness served as a terrifying, unforgettable reminder of human fragility. Patrick Swayze's legacy is not just one of cinematic brilliance, but of an unbreakable warrior spirit that fought until the very last frame. He proved that true strength isn't found in a muscular physique, but in the raw, unyielding courage to face the inevitable end with your head held high, dancing through the darkness until the music finally stops. Olivia Newton-John. Olivia Newton-John was a radiant, global symbol of pure joy and ethereal beauty, a multi-platinum music icon whose angelic voice and legendary performance as Sandy in Grease permanently etched her into the hearts of millions. With her sparkling blue eyes and a seemingly endless supply of positive energy, she projected an image of wholesome, sun-drenched perfection that defined the late 70s and early 80s. She was the quintessential girl next door who conquered the world through kindness and talent. However, behind the multi-billion-dollar success and the global adoration, Newton-John was locked in an agonizing 3-decade-long war against a persistent and terrifyingly lethal predator, breast cancer. Her life became a relentless cycle of hope and heartbreak as the disease first struck in 1992, only to return with a vengeance twice more. The absolute climax of this decades-long medical odyssey occurred when the cancer aggressively returned for a third time, mutating into incurable stage 4 metastatic breast cancer that spread to the base of her spine. Facing the terrifying reality of a terminal diagnosis, she chose to respond not with bitterness, but with a profound, breathtaking grace that inspired the entire world. She became a fierce, highly vocal pioneer for plant-based medicine and holistic healing, launching a world-class wellness and research center to ensure that future generations wouldn't have to suffer as she did. The immense physical toll of the disease, which eventually left her struggling to walk, was met with a radiant, unshakable optimism that seemed almost superhuman. Her heartbreaking passing in 2022 at the age of 73 triggered a massive global outpouring of love for a woman who spent her final years as a thriver rather than just a survivor. Watching the vibrant, athletic star who once told the world to get physical become a frail, yet spiritually luminous warrior against a terminal illness was a profoundly moving, tear-jerking tragedy. Olivia Newton-John's incredibly magnificent, deeply inspiring legacy is a powerful testament to the fact that true beauty is entirely internal. She proved that even in the face of an incurable, devastating illness, one can still radiate light and hope. She remains an eternal emblem of grace, showing the world that while cancer can take the body, it can never touch a soul that chooses to remain forever hopelessly devoted to life. Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the undisputed queen of modern television comedy, a record-breaking powerhouse who has redefined the industry with her sharp wit and unparalleled comedic timing. From the legendary Elaine Beans on Seinfeld to the fiercely ambitious Selena Meyer on Veep, she has dominated the Emmy stage more than almost any other performer in history. She projected an image of absolute control, professional perfection, and a seemingly limitless supply of vibrant energy. However, at the absolute soaring peak of her professional success, just one day after winning her record-breaking 6th consecutive Emmy, the actress was violently struck by a horrifying, life-altering medical tragedy. She was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer, a terrifying realization that instantly shattered the celebratory atmosphere of her historic win and plunged her into an agonizing private war for survival. Instead of retreating into the shadows of her immense wealth, Louis Dreyfus made the courageous decision to go public with her battle, weaponizing her monumental fame to aggressively advocate for universal health care and breast cancer awareness. She faced the grueling, physically devastating reality of 6 intense rounds of chemotherapy with the same fierce, gritty determination that defined her most iconic characters. The immense physical toll of the treatments, combined with the heavy, suffocating psychological burden of a life-threatening illness, was a profoundly dark and exhausting ordeal. Yet, she refused to let the disease dampen her spirit, frequently sharing raw, humorous updates that showcased her unbreakable resilience. Her journey was an incredibly powerful, deeply moving narrative of a woman who refused to be defined by her diagnosis, even when facing the terrifying possibility of losing everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Today, having successfully achieved full remission and returned to her illustrious career with more fire than ever, she stands as a magnificent, deeply inspiring symbol of survival. Her harrowing battle fundamentally changed the global conversation surrounding women's health, proving that true, enduring strength is found in the ability to find humor and hope in the darkest of circumstances. Julia Louis-Dreyfus' incredibly tragic, magnificently inspiring legacy is a powerful testament to the fact that even the most legendary icons are fundamentally fragile. She continues to dominate the screen today, powerfully demonstrating that a diagnosis is merely a chapter, not the end of a story, and that the human spirit is far more resilient than any cruel disease could ever imagine. Alex Trebek. Alex Trebek was far more than a game show host. He was a majestic, dignified fixture of the American household, the calm and intellectual professor who guided millions of viewers through the challenging world of Jeopardy for nearly 4 decades. With his sophisticated demeanor, sharp intellect, and a voice that exuded absolute authority and grace, he was the personification of stability and reliability. He was an untouchable icon of television, a man who seemed entirely immune to the chaotic fluctuations of fame. However, the entire world stood still in absolute paralyzing terror on March 6, 2019, when Trebek released a deeply personal video to deliver a message that felt like a global heartbreak. He bravely announced that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and merciless killers in the medical world. Facing an incredibly grim prognosis and an agonizing daily confrontation with his own mortality, Trebek chose to respond with a profound, breathtaking dignity that inspired the entire globe. He vowed to fight the disease with every ounce of his being, continuing to host his beloved show while undergoing grueling, physically exhausting rounds of chemotherapy. The sight of the once vibrant and commanding icon becoming visibly frail, yet still maintaining his sharp wit and unwavering professionalism, was a profoundly moving, tear-jerking image that triggered a massive outpouring of global love. He weaponized his final chapter to bring unprecedented attention to the signs and symptoms of pancreatic cancer, becoming a fierce advocate for those fighting the same silent, deadly predator. His heartbreaking passing in 2020 triggered an unprecedented global mourning for a man who had become a fundamental part of our collective daily lives. The realization that even a man of his incredible intellect and dignified presence could be so rapidly dismantled by a cruel illness served as a terrifying, unforgettable reminder of human fragility. Alex Trebek's incredibly magnificent, deeply inspiring legacy is a powerful testament to the fact that true, enduring royalty is forged through grace and courage in the face of the inevitable end. He proved that even in the darkest valley, one can still radiate light and hope. He remains an eternal emblem of dignity, showing the world that while cancer can take the body, it can never touch a soul that chooses to remain forever committed to the pursuit of knowledge in the service of others. Sam Neill. Sam Neill has spent decades as a cornerstone of international cinema, famously known as a stoic, intellectually brilliant Dr. Alan Grant in the massive Jurassic Park franchise. With his calm, understated charisma and a voice that carries the weight of authentic authority, he has always projected an image of quiet, unshakable stability. However, the world was left in a state of absolute gut-wrenching shock when the veteran actor revealed that while he was busy promoting a new blockbuster, he was secretly fighting a terrifying Stage 3 battle against angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma, a rare and exceptionally aggressive form of blood cancer. This wasn't just a sudden medical crisis. It was a violent, life-altering collision with mortality that nearly claimed the life of the legendary New Zealander within months of his diagnosis. The harrowing reality of his ordeal was marked by a series of devastating setbacks, including the initial failure of traditional chemotherapy, which left his doctors frantically searching for a viable alternative as his condition rapidly worsened. Facing an incredibly grim prognosis, Neill was forced to undergo an experimental, highly precarious treatment regimen that required a brutal commitment to lifelong infusions just to stay alive. In his remarkably raw and deeply vulnerable memoir, he bravely confessed the paralyzing fear of his own slow fade, documenting the agonizing physical toll of the cancer and the heavy, suffocating psychological burden of knowing his survival now depends entirely on a fragile, monthly medical miracle. Today, despite being in a state of remission that relies on continuous treatment, Neill stands as a profoundly inspiring, heartbreaking symbol of raw human endurance. He has emerged from the darkness with a fiercely renewed sense of purpose, choosing to embrace his craft and his family with a breathtaking newfound intensity. Watching a man who once outran prehistoric monsters on screen now face the very real, invisible monster of cancer is a profoundly moving, tear-jerking tragedy. Sam Neill's journey is a magnificent testament to the unbreakable power of the human spirit, proving that even when faced with an absolute death sentence, the will to live and the courage to tell one's story can become a powerful, life-saving light in the darkness. Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges is an absolute beloved titan of Hollywood, an Academy Award-winning powerhouse whose effortless cool and rugged, the dude persona have made him a global symbol of laid-back resilience. With his booming voice and a seemingly immortal, vibrant energy, he has always appeared entirely immune to the ravages of time or stress. However, in 2020, the invincible star was violently struck by a terrifying dual medical catastrophe that pushed him to the absolute agonizing brink of death. While filming his hit series The Old Man, Bridges was suddenly diagnosed with lymphoma, a serious cancer of the lymphatic system, shortly before contracting a severe, near-fatal case of COVID-19, while his immune system was completely decimated by chemotherapy. This wasn't just a health battle. It was a horrifying, months-long war for every single breath. Bridges spent weeks in the hospital, so weak that he was unable to even roll over in bed without excruciating effort. The terrifying reality of being a prisoner in his own failing body, unable to breathe or move, was a profoundly dark and isolating nightmare that nearly extinguished his famous optimism. He later confessed that he felt himself dancing with death, experiencing a level of vulnerability that no amount of cinematic heroics could have prepared him for. The sight of the once strapping, energetic icon requiring oxygen and months of grueling physical therapy just to walk his daughter down the wedding aisle was a deeply haunting, universally moving image of human fragility. Yet, with a ferocious determination that shocked his medical team, Bridges miraculously clawed his way back to life, achieving full remission from cancer and making a full recovery from his respiratory failure. Today, he stands as a magnificent, deeply moving symbol of survival and profound gratitude. He has returned to the screen with a radiant, renewed perspective, frequently discussing how his brush with mortality clarified what truly matters: love, family, and the precious gift of time. Jeff Bridges' harrowing, magnificent journey is a powerful, tear-jerking reminder that even the most indestructible legends are fundamentally fragile. He continues to live with an infectious, unyielding joy, proving that the human spirit is far more resilient than any combination of cruel diseases could ever imagine. Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer was once the ultimate high-octane golden boy of Hollywood, a fiercely talented, classically trained actor whose striking looks and commanding masculine voice made him a dominant force in classics like Top Gun and The Doors. He possessed a magnetic, explosive energy and a legendary, chameleonic ability to disappear into any role. However, behind his famously intense and enigmatic exterior, Kilmer was forced into a silent, agonizing, and life-altering confrontation with throat cancer. For years, the actor lived in deep denial, initially attempting to hide his devastating diagnosis from the public while undergoing a series of grueling, physically destructive treatments that would permanently shatter his iconic persona. The horrifying reality of his battle required a series of invasive surgeries, including a tracheostomy, which ultimately saved his life, but at a devastating, unimaginable cost. It nearly entirely destroyed his legendary voice. For a performer whose entire artistic identity and professional livelihood were intricately tied to his vocal command, the loss was a profoundly crushing, life-shattering tragedy. The once vibrant and handsome icon was left unable to speak clearly or breathe naturally, forced to use a prosthetic device to communicate. Watching the man who played Iceman struggle to utter a single syllable is a profoundly moving, deeply haunting testament to the merciless ravages of illness. Despite the immense physical disfigurement and the heavy, suffocating grief of losing his greatest tool, Kilmer has undergone a magnificent, highly inspiring transformation. He has bravely utilized cutting-edge AI technology to recreate his voice for film and released an incredibly raw, tear-jerking documentary that pulled back the curtain on his daily physical struggle. He has emerged not as a victim, but as a fierce, creative warrior who continues to express himself through painting and writing. Val Kilmer's journey is an incredibly tragic, magnificently inspiring narrative of survival against all odds. He powerfully proves that while a cruel disease can steal a man's voice and his livelihood, it can absolutely never touch the fiery, unbreakable spirit of a true, immortal artist who refuses to be silenced by the darkness. As these 20 legends prove, the blinding lights of Hollywood cannot fade the shadows of a terminal diagnosis. We've witnessed the breathtaking courage of icons who chose to turn their darkest tragedies into a global beacon of hope. But it leaves us with a haunting question. Does the relentless pressure to remain invincible in the public eye make their suffering even more unbearable? Or is their fame the very weapon they use to survive? Which of these stories touched your soul the deepest? We want to hear your thoughts. Spark the debate in the comments below. If you found this tribute moving, please like and share. Don't forget to subscribe to American Icon Stories for more untold tales of Hollywood's greatest legends. See you in the next one.